A young widow, clutching her baby, asks a decorated general for his leftovers. She expected a plate of cold pasta. What she received instead was a second chance at life, delivered by the one man who understood her sacrifice. The evening air in downtown Portland was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant, electric promise of autumn rain. At a small wrought iron table outside Café Bellecourt, General Alistair Vance, United States Army, retired, sat alone, a statue of quiet authority amidst the city's gentle hum. At 70, his posture was still ramrod straight, a lifetime of command etched into the set of his shoulders. The city flowed around him, laughing couples, hurried commuters, the soft clinking of cutlery, a world he had spent his life protecting, yet one from which he now felt strangely distant. His plate of pasta arrabbiata, exquisitely prepared and fiercely expensive, sat half-finished. His appetite these days was a ghost, a hollow echo of what it once was. It had been 2 years since Patricia, his wife of nearly 50 years, had lost her final battle with cancer. The grief was no longer a raw, gaping wound, but a constant, low-grade ache in his soul. Solitary meals, once a rare luxury, were now just a reminder of the empty chair across from him, a silence that no amount of ambient city noise could fill. He glanced at his wrist, not at a flashy Swiss watch, but at a rugged, battle-scarred military timepiece. It had seen him through campaigns in 2 different deserts, it scratches and scuffs a map of his life's most defining moments. Patricia had always hated it, calling it his ugly old thing, but she understood why he wore it. It was a part of him. He had a board meeting for a veterans' charity the next morning, but the thought of his sterile, opulent hotel suite held no appeal. These moments, sitting and observing the simple, beautiful chaos of civilian life, were his refuge. He watched a young couple debate over a menu, a group of students laughing at a shared joke, the small, unscripted dramas of an ordinary Tuesday evening. It was a world of breathtaking, fragile peace. Then, he saw her. She moved through the outdoor seating area with a slow, deliberate grace, as if navigating a minefield. She held a baby clutched tightly to her chest, the infant bundled in a simple, hand-knitted blanket against the encroaching chill. The young woman's blonde hair was pulled back into a severe ponytail, and her clothes, though meticulously clean, were worn thin with the unmistakable patina of hardship. She paused near the cafe's entrance, her eyes sweeping across the diners. It wasn't the predatory gaze of a practiced grifter, but a hesitant, almost fearful scan, a search for an opportunity born of sheer necessity. There was a quiet dignity in her bearing that seemed at war with her obvious desperation. For a brief, electric moment, their eyes met. In hers, he saw more than just need. He saw intelligence, resilience, and a profound, bone-deep exhaustion he recognized from the faces of his young soldiers after a week-long patrol. She took a breath, a small act of summoning courage, and began to walk toward his table. She stopped at a respectful distance, careful not to crowd his space. "Excuse me, sir," she said. Her voice was soft, yet it cut through the cafe chatter with a surprising clarity. "I am so sorry to bother you. I noticed you weren't finishing your meal." She paused, her gaze flickering to his half-eaten pasta and then back to his face. The words came out in a quiet rush, heavy with shame but buoyed by resolve. "May I have your leftovers?" The question hung in the air, a fragile, desperate bridge between their 2 worlds. In his long life, General Vance had been asked for many things, for orders that would send men to their deaths, for strategic counsel that would shape nations, for millions of dollars in philanthropic donations. But he had never been asked for his leftovers. Not like this. There was no entitlement, no aggression. It was the purest, most unvarnished request for help he had ever heard. He studied her more closely now. She couldn't have been more than 28. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of countless sleepless nights, of a mother's worry that gnaws at the soul. The baby in her arms, a tiny, perfect bundle, stirred and made a soft cooing sound. The sound pierced the general's carefully constructed composure. It was the sound of life, of innocence, of a future that deserved more than a stranger's cold pasta. "Of course," General Vance said, his voice emerging gruffer than he intended. He cleared his throat and softened his tone. He pushed his chair back, the metal scraping softly on the stone patio. "Please. Would you like to sit down?" The young woman, Sarah, seemed taken aback by the invitation. A flicker of suspicion crossed her features before being replaced by uncertainty. "Oh, no, sir. I couldn't. I don't want to intrude on your evening." "You are not intruding," the general stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. It was the voice he'd used for decades to command colonels and calm ambassadors. "I was just finishing. Please, sit. It would be my pleasure." He gestured to the empty chair, and with a final, hesitant nod, she settled into it, adjusting the baby in her arms with the practiced, fluid ease of a mother. The infant, a little girl with a dusting of blonde hair, blinked open her eyes, regarding the world with a calm, unfocused wonder. "I'm Alistair," he said, signaling the waiter with a discreet but commanding flick of his fingers. "Sarah," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "And this is Lily." The waiter, a young man with an attentive air, approached their table immediately. "General Vance, good to see you again, sir. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, Michael," the general said warmly. "Could you please bring another portion of the pasta arrabbiata, a side of your excellent bread, and a hot cup of tea for my guest?" He then turned to Sarah. "The food here is quite good. You shouldn't have to settle for my leftovers." Sarah's eyes instantly filled with tears, which she fought to blink away, her chin trembling slightly. "You don't have to do that, sir. I didn't mean to. I wasn't asking for a handout." "I know exactly what you meant," the general said, his voice softening into something almost paternal. "You were asking for help. And I would like to offer it. Please, allow me." As they waited, a fragile, tentative conversation began to build between them. The general, a man accustomed to leading discussions on global strategy, found himself asking simple questions, drawing out her story with a gentle, patient skill. He learned that Sarah had come to Portland 6 months ago. She spoke in careful, measured sentences, editing her life for a stranger, but the story was there in the gaps, in the things she didn't say. She mentioned her husband, a soldier, and a sudden move. She spoke of a job at a diner that had abruptly closed, of the crushing expense of childcare, of nights spent at a women's shelter where the kindness of strangers was a lifeline. "My husband, he was in the army," she said, her gaze dropping to the sleeping face of her daughter. "He was stationed at Fort Lewis, in Washington. We were planning our future. He was killed in action in Afghanistan, just over a year ago." The words landed on General Vance's soul like a physical blow. Killed in action. The clinical, sterile phrase that could never capture the brutal reality. A Gold Star widow. He felt a sudden, cold fury rise within him, followed by a wave of profound, crushing shame. This woman, this child, was a part of the sacred trust he had sworn to uphold. She was the living legacy of a man who had given everything. And she was on the street, asking for his table scraps. The entire context of the evening shifted. This was no longer a chance encounter with a person in need. This was a dereliction of duty. Somewhere, the system had failed. He had failed. He looked at Sarah, and he no longer saw a stranger. He saw the face of every young spouse he had ever tried to comfort at a memorial service. He saw the embodiment of a promise he had made to every soldier who ever served under his command: "We will take care of your own." His internal monologue was a storm of self-recrimination. How did we let this happen? We build multi-billion-dollar aircraft and debate global policy, but we can't ensure the widow of a hero has enough food to eat. He remembered signing the letters, hundreds of them over the years. The crisp, formal stationery, the carefully chosen words of condolence that always felt so hollow, so inadequate. He had always ended them with a pledge that the nation would never forget their sacrifice. He looked at Sarah's worn-out shoes and the desperate hope in her eyes, and the words mocked him. When Sarah's fresh, hot meal arrived, she ate with a slow, deliberate appreciation that made the general's heart ache. He watched her, a storm of memories and emotions raging within him. He thought of Patricia, of her fierce advocacy for military families. She would have been appalled. She would have been furious. And then, she would have acted. The general knew, with absolute certainty, what he had to do. This was no longer a matter of charity. It was a matter of honor. The initial awkwardness between them slowly dissolved, replaced by a shared language of service. The general, seeing her not as a victim but as a member of his extended military family, began to speak more freely. He asked about her husband, his rank, his unit. Sarah, in turn, opened up, speaking of her late husband, Sergeant Michael Williams, with a mixture of love, pride, and an ever-present sorrow. She spoke of his goofy sense of humor, his unwavering dedication to his men, and his dream of opening a small woodworking shop after he left the army. He always said being a sergeant was the best job in the world, Sarah said, a sad smile gracing her lips. He called his soldiers his kids. He worried about them constantly. That's what a good NCO does, the general affirmed, a deep respect in his tone. They are the backbone of the army. Without men like your husband, generals like me are nothing but old men with maps. This shared understanding created a powerful bond. For the first time in months, Sarah felt seen, not as a charity case or a struggling single mother, but as a person whose sacrifice was understood and valued. The general, for his part, felt a connection to the core of his identity that his comfortable retirement had begun to erode. He wasn't just a wealthy old man, he was a commander, and this was one of his own. He found himself telling her about Patricia. My wife, she was the real four-star in our family, he said, a genuine warmth filling his voice. She held our family together through a dozen moves and 3 combat deployments. She knew the names of every officer's spouse in my command, and she knew their struggles. She always said that our duty didn't end at the base gates. As the cafe began to empty and the city lights twinkled to life, the general made a decision. It felt less like a choice and more like the inevitable execution of a long-standing order. He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored blazer and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. He took a pen from his pocket and wrote a name and a number on the back. Sarah, he said, his voice imbued with a gentle but firm authority. I want you to call this number tomorrow morning. At 9 o'clock sharp. Ask for Helen Martinez. Tell her General Vance sent you. Sarah looked at the card, her brow furrowed in confusion. It read, the Patricia Vance Honor Foundation. Below the name was a simple motto, serving the families of our nation's finest. I don't understand, sir, she stammered. After my wife passed, I established a foundation in her name, the general explained, his gaze direct and unwavering. Its sole mission is to provide comprehensive support for our Gold Star and wounded warrior families. It's not a handout, Sarah. It's a support system. We offer emergency housing assistance, childcare vouchers, career placement services, legal aid, and educational grants. It's what we do. It's the promise we keep. Sarah stared at the card, her hands trembling. But why? You don't even know me. The general was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the baby, Lily, who had opened her eyes and was gazing at the twinkling lights of the cafe with the pure, unfocused wonder of infancy. Because 45 years ago, he said softly, I was a young captain with a baby girl of my own, my daughter, also named Sarah. Patricia and I were stationed at Fort Bragg, living in a cramped apartment on a salary that barely covered the bills. Our car broke down, and we didn't have the money to fix it. I was about to miss a critical field exercise. I was desperate. He paused, the memory as clear as yesterday. My commanding officer, a gruff old colonel named McGregor, found out. He didn't say a word. He just threw a set of keys on my desk and said, "My wife's car. Have it back by Sunday." Later, he sat me down and told me something I never forgot: "Vance, taking care of your troops doesn't just mean leading them in battle. It means making sure their families are okay, so they can do their job. It's one mission." That man's act of dignity saved my career. He saw a future for me that I couldn't see for myself. He taught me that our real legacy isn't in the battles we win, but in the people we lift up. He leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "Say you'll call Helen, Sarah. Say you'll let us help you get back on your feet. Your husband earned it. You've earned it." Tears were now falling freely down Christina's cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming relief, of a burden finally being lifted. "I will," she whispered, clutching the card as if it were a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you." As they prepared to part ways, the general asked one more question. "That job interview you mentioned tomorrow, where is it?" "It's at 10 o'clock, Sarah said, gathering her things with a new, lighter energy. "At the Marriott downtown. For a housekeeping position." The general smiled, a rare, genuine smile that seemed to erase years from his face. "The general manager there, a man named Tom Bradley, is an old friend. He served under my command in the 90s. He held up a hand as Sarah started to protest. "I'm not going to guarantee you a job. You'll earn that on your own. But I am going to call him tonight and make sure he sees what I see, a person of immense character, strength, and determination. I'll make sure he knows he has a hero's widow coming in for an interview." The next morning, Sarah made the call. Helen Martinez, the director of the Patricia Vance Honor Foundation, was waiting for it. The wheels of a well-oiled, compassionate machine began to turn. Within 48 hours, Sarah and Lily were moved from the crowded shelter into a clean, safe, fully furnished apartment leased by the foundation. A certified daycare provider, also a military spouse, was arranged for Lily. The foundation's on-staff counselor, a retired Army psychologist, scheduled an appointment with Sarah to help her navigate the complex grief she had been carrying alone for so long. When Sarah walked into the Marriott for her interview, Tom Bradley greeted her personally. The interview was a formality. Impressed by her composure and intelligence, and armed with the general's powerful recommendation, he offered her a position not in housekeeping, but as an administrative assistant in the hotel's event planning department. It was a role with regular hours, benefits, and a path for advancement. For the first time in over a year, Sarah saw a stable, promising future stretch out before her. 6 months passed. A handwritten letter, on simple, elegant stationery, arrived at General Vance's office. "Dear General Vance, I hope this letter finds you well. It feels impossible to try and put my gratitude into words. I think about that evening at the cafe often. You didn't just give me a meal, you gave me back my dignity. With the foundation's help, my life has completely transformed. Lily is thriving in her daycare, and I love my new job. I've enclosed a picture of her, she's sitting up all by herself now and has 2 teeth. But the help went beyond the practical. The counseling has helped me process Michael's death in ways I couldn't before. And more than that, you inspired me. I've joined a support group at my new job for employees who are veterans or from military families. I've been sharing my story, and helping others navigate the VA system. You showed me that asking for help isn't a weakness, and now I'm trying to show others that offering it is our greatest strength. You reminded me that in the military family, we are never strangers. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for seeing me. With deepest respect. Sarah Williams." The general read the letter twice, a lump forming in his throat. He looked at the photo of the smiling, healthy baby and felt a sense of profound peace. He carefully folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer, right next to the faded photograph of Patricia. That evening, General Vance stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, looking out at the sprawling tapestry of city lights below. For 2 years, he had felt like a ghost haunting his own life, his purpose retired along with his uniform. His work with the foundation had felt meaningful, but abstract, a matter of budgets, board meetings, and strategic plans. The encounter with Sarah had changed everything. It had made the mission real again. It had given him a face, a name, and a story to connect with the numbers on his spreadsheets. He picked up his phone and called his daughter in Seattle. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "Everything okay?" "Everything is more than okay, sweetheart," he replied. "I've been thinking about your mother a lot today. Remember her favorite saying? About how everyone deserves a second chance." "Of course, I do. She lived by it." "I think she would have added something to that," the general said, his voice quiet with revelation. "I think she would have said that sometimes, giving someone else a second chance, gives you one, too." He ended the call and continued to gaze out at the city. He had spent his career serving his country, leading men, making decisions that affected thousands. Yet, in the quiet twilight of his life, he was beginning to understand that his most important duty was not yet complete. The promise made to a young soldier on a dusty battlefield extends long after the guns fall silent. It extends to the families left behind, to the widows and children who carry the true cost of war. Helping Sarah wasn't charity. It was the fulfillment of that duty. It was the closing of a circle, a final salute to Sergeant Michael Williams and all the men like him. It had rekindled the fire in his own soul, giving him a new mission, a new reason to fight. It had reminded him that true leadership isn't about the stars on your shoulder, but about the people you lift up. The encounter had been a simple, profound miracle, a miracle of human connection, reminding him that we are all, in the end, part of the same unit, and that our most sacred duty is to never, ever leave anyone behind. A single act of honor can echo through generations. It can save a life, and in doing so, save a part of ourselves. All around us are the families of those who have served and sacrificed. Their quiet strength is the bedrock of our nation. Let's show them they are not forgotten. Comment, honor, below to pay tribute to all military families and the heroes they love.